I was doing some research into crystals, and so I got these small crystals off of Amazon, tried them in different arrangements, different alignments. Here's a triangle, and then I tried them in a circle, and I could actually sense an energy flow when I had the crystals in a circle. So then I went and got larger crystals off of Amazon, put them in a circle, and I could still sense it. You know, there was something starting to flow. There was energy moving, and I thought, well, how in the world can I keep these in this arrangement? And so what I did is I took an old sock, and I stuffed these inside of a sock, and then stuffed the end of the sock into the opening of the sock, as you can see here. The end of the sock goes into here, and then to hold everything together and to keep the crystals from touching each other, I went to get string to hold them apart, and couldn't find string, but I did have twistums, so I put twistums in here, and to hold the crystals apart and to hold the ends of the sock together. And I could really sense an energy flow off of that. And I thought, well, I'll make one for my wife. So I did the same thing for my wife, but instead of using twistums, I used ribbons and gave it to her. She said she really couldn't sense anything off of it. I thought, well, let me test it myself, and I couldn't either. So I took that one apart, but it apparently has to do something with the twistums compared to the ribbons were causing an effect. So I thought, well, maybe it's the metal. So I made another one with pieces of metal between the crystals, and that did not have the same effect as the twistums. Then I thought, well, maybe it's the circle of wire that's inside of that. So I made this device, and this is simply a container that I cut down and put some slits into it, and got galvanized fender washers and stuffed them into the slits, taped crystals to it so the crystals were firing through the centers of the fender washers all around. And what I discovered was that this was creating a spirit field just like the water bowls. We're going for the spirit reading. There it is. And I did discover it even gets excited by the presence of another bowl or another spirit field. And let's go for the edge here. There's the edge right there. We're going to slide this one closer to it. Now let's see how excited it gets. Still going out, still going out, still going out, still going out, still going out. Whoa, still more? Right there is the edge. But the interesting thing here is that because this has got galvanized washers, galvanized is zinc coated, this is zinc. So this is not a good spirit field to be working with because it's so high in zinc. Now, I also discovered that working with this, I gave this thing the command to come to me, and it would become almost like a marker field. Now, it is not exactly a marker field because it doesn't go down also, it only goes up. But it will come to me, but it also induces zinc into me, which can mess up my mineral balances, which is not a good feeling. But by researching that, I realized I could also give this field the command to come to me, and this actually doesn't have a problem with the minerals. So it's interesting that these bowls, you can actually command them to come to you. But the interesting thing here is that I told this field to come to me, and I started feeling sick because of all the zinc that was in it. So I thought, well, I don't need any more of this. And I thought, well, I could shut it off, tell it to quit coming to me, or take the thing apart. But I thought, nah, let's just leave it here. And I went and shut the bedroom door, went out to the studio, shut that door, went out to the garage, shut that door. So there's 3 doors between me and this device. And now I'm in the garage at the far end of the house. And it was a hot day, so I had the bedroom window open. I'm in the bedroom right now. And I had the garage door open. And as I was working in the garage, I started feeling the sickness of zinc levels being too high. And I checked the air, and here through the open garage door, this field was coming, and I realized that this field, I told it to come to me, and I shut 3 doors. It was taking the path of least resistance. It was going through that open window and around the house to the other side of the house into the garage where I was at. It's like, oh, that is ridiculous. But that brought me to the next phase of knowing that, that crystals will, when you fire them through metals like that, become extremely strong as far as the spirit field. So then I put together a contraption that stood up a bunch of these gold rings that we had around the house and fired crystals through those. But those also had a sickening feeling because this is not 24 karat gold. This is a blend of gold and other metals. So that wouldn't work. And then I realized I have got to get a hold of 24 karat gold. But where am I going to get that? They don't make jewelry in 24 karat. Then I discovered online that they sell 24 karat coated playing cards. Now, I purchased my cards about a year ago online, and they were gold on both sides. Now, I noticed the newer ones have ink on the face part of the card, and I do not know anything about the toxicity of the ink, so a person can actually just use the back sides of those cards, the 24 karat gold, and if you have to use both sides of the card, then you can put the two cards with faces together, so just the back sides are exposed to the energies that a person might be using them for. You will notice with the playing cards that they have a thin layer of plastic that goes over the 24 karat gold, which is just layered really thin. Apparently it's over an aluminum face, so it's aluminum with a gold, 24 karat gold coating on it, and then plastic over that. Now, I have not yet detected any toxicity off of the plastic, but it could be that the way the gold reads. 24 karat gold has a very unusual property as far as reading and what it does with other elements, but a person can avoid the plastic coating by going to using edible gold, which is small sheets of gold. 24. You got to go 24 karat, but you can get the edible gold that you can use on food. And you can also go with crafting gold, which is sheets, and some of them actually have an adhesive to the back, so you can actually just press them into place with wherever you're using them. But that gives you a 24 karat surface without the plastic, without the ink, which is a good way to go. One of the things that I noticed in my research is that the energy that flows off the crystals becomes extremely excited and accelerated over the surface of 24 karat gold. It will also accelerate over other metals, but particularly 24 karat gold. So if you take the cards, and see, I have them laid down with the backs up, so these actually don't have any ink on them, but if you had ones with the ink, just put the ink down, and the cards cannot be touching. We do not want an electrical connection between the cards, but the gap then has a crystal on it. And by putting a gap on there, it creates a very strong spirit reading over it. Now, the interesting thing is that this spirit reading that I have does not go like a spirit bowl, like a water bowl, or like that device I made with the washers. The spirit reading here goes up and down off of this device. And it's very, very, very strong spirit reading. And I have not much information as far as what it's doing or why it's doing, but it's just, if you're energy sensitive, just try this arrangement. And the numbers don't matter. I found that doesn't matter at all. But there's a strong spirit reading that comes off of it with the combination of the crystals and the gold. But I wanted to replicate what I found with the galvanized washers, and so I cut a hole into one of the cards and took a crystal and made a little cardboard mount for it and fired the crystal through the hole in the card and got nothing. Almost no reading at all. That was... And I tried a lot of holes in it. I tried a whole bunch of different designs and stuff, and I couldn't get any good effect off of it. And then I thought, well, instead of doing a hole, let's try doing a slit. So then I went and made this device, and you can see what this is. This is just two cards that are held up, and you can see the base of this is just a piece of cardboard that I cut almost all the way through, and then bent it up, put some masking tape, tan masking tape on it to hold it into this 90-degree shape. And I started testing this device, and I found strong energy flowing through this arrangement. But this arrangement turned out to be very, very particular. This device is very particular. It cannot have any metals involved with the setup at all. It cannot have anything touching the sides. No wires, no lines, no sticks, nothing on the sides, and very minimal on the bottom. And you can see what I did here to hold these things up, and they actually need a gap under here. What I did is I actually took toothpicks and I taped them together using that same tape, the tan masking tape, taped them together, and then I also trimmed the ends of the toothpicks off so they're not pointed like this. I trimmed them off so that they're not sticking up as far, and then I slid the card between the toothpicks, and the toothpicks then are just stuck into the corrugation there. Also very particular on this is the spacing. This thing requires anywhere from a 1/2 inch spacing between the cards to 3/4 inch, and it maxes out, the energy is the strongest at 3/4 inch. So I made myself a spacer, and this is 3/4 inch wide and 3 inches long. 3/4 inches goes right down through there, so I know I have that right. And then when I take the crystal and aim it at it, here we go. The crystal has to hit anywhere from 1/4 of the way up the card to half the way up the card. Now the crystals are pretty hard to aim. You know, it's pretty hard to tell. But anywhere between half of the card to 1/4 the way up the card is where you aim for. And the distance from the crystal to the card, it can be closer, but it maxes out its energy. You get the strongest energy at 3 inch gap, and thus the spacer being 3 inches long and 3/4 inch wide, so you can get that gap. And this thing really, really churns out the energy. If you're wondering how in the world I came up with the design, it was actually from reading, the spirit reading off of it, and the strength of the signal that I was getting off of it. So I kept adjusting things and changing things and the signal increased. You know, I tested different widths and everything, but that's how I was actually detecting it, letting the pendulum guide me as far as the design of this device. Now this requires at least 6 inch clearance along the side and along the top, at least 1 inch clearance along the bottom. Another thing that's important is that the ends of the crystals need to be open. Anything that covers them, it will stop the flow of the energy. And I try to, when I make the base, I try to make the base so it hits about where the taper, when the crystals come down, when they come down to the bottom, that's where I want the base. I try not to let the base extend beyond that, just so it doesn't interfere with it. But anyhow, nothing covering the ends of the crystals. If you want to shut this thing down, you just put a piece of paper between here and there, or just drape something over this, and it will stop the energy flow. Another thing that was very unique is any stick like this touching the edge will stop the energy, or touching the top. You know, I'm allowed, I can put a little bit on the bottom. The bottom is not so bad. But the one thing that's unique is I can actually put this stick to the face of it, and that will not stop. So if you have a situation where the thing is leaning over too far, you can actually take a little piece of tape and put something on here to help support it. And I have done that before, and it has still worked quite well. But it acts very much like a battery, like a spirit battery. And you can actually hook these in series to increase the energy flow, because this face of this crystal is firing over the face of these cards. Well, you have another face out here, and you can also put cards out here to interact with it. And you can put another crystal here that would interact with the back face of these cards. And you can go crystal, card, crystal, card, crystal, card, and increase as it goes. Now, a little word of caution here is if you're using the face of cards, if you're using cards that have the ink on them, here's where I recommend that you take 2 cards together and tape them together with just a little bit of tape along the edge so that the faces are touching each other, so only the backs, because the backs are the 24 karat gold without the ink. And so that way the ink would be encapsulated inside. You wouldn't have to worry about that interference. But if you are using tape, use just a small piece of the brown masking tape. No Scotch tape. Scotch tape is toxic and will actually get into the fields that you're working with. So if you make a series of these with crystals, cards, crystals, cards, crystals, cards, they increase as you go. Now I made, for my own research, 3 of these, 3 setups like this. And so at the very end, I was getting some very strange phenomenon. One of which is that my reading positive that my body wants something is that way. And the body doesn't want something that's counterclockwise. But I found out at one end of this device, and I forget which end, the reading is actually opposite. If my body wants it, it's counterclockwise, and doesn't want it, it's clockwise. So somehow the directional reading from my pendulum is somehow tied up with the current that flows through these devices. I also noticed a cation charge at the end of the 3. Right at the very end here, there's a cation charge that was building up, and I thought that was really interesting that a spirit-filled device would be producing a cation charge, because that's also a positive ion charge in the orb. So I thought, well, maybe the spirit fields have a positive ion charge. Also interesting was the marker fields. I wanted to see if this affected the marker field, so I went to test the marker field, and I'm looking for copper, and it was not there. What I found out was happening was that the marker field was being sucked right into where the crystal was firing. So there's actually like a vacuum that's occurring with these types of fields. That this is forcing a vacuum. Something else that was fascinating, a series of 3 of these, I will oftentimes, when I'm in worship or in church or in a prayer meeting, I will have an energy sensation where my hands will start to burn. And I don't know exactly what causes that, but I found it interesting that these I can actually feel. And if I put my hand down toward the base of these, out a little bit on both sides, my hands will start to burn with that same energy that I feel when I'm in prayer or worship. So it's like, well, that's interesting, because there's, it feels like the exact same energy field that's flowing. But it's interesting because the cation charge is up here, that hand burning thing is down here. So that is really fascinating. I found it bulky and cumbersome to be using a series of 3, so I thought, well, let's see if we can make a big unit that just, has everything condensed. So what I did is I took the cards and I put them on their sides, and I stuck another card just so they're slightly overlapped, and put a little piece of that tape on there. And this is the spot here where you really have to be careful about not using toxic tape, like Scotch tape. And I have this blue tape that I'm using, a blue masking tape, but I didn't even want to use that here. I wanted to use that brown because I don't trust what's in that ink. And the ink doesn't bother down there, but the ink would it would get into the field if it was up here, so I use that brown masking tape. So anyhow, it's just overlapped just slightly enough so I can get a grip on it. And the same dimensions take place as far as the clearance on the edge, the gap in the middle, the distances, everything is the same. And I also went and bought some expensive crystals. And after I got these, I found out they really don't work much better than even these. But, they're pretty, so I continue to use them. And I get the same manifestations off this device. Let me tip this one over so it's out of... so that we're actually like at the end of a series of 3. I get the cation charge up here, I get the hand burning down here, I get the, whenever I'm testing for a marker field, it's getting sucked into this right here. So I'm getting the same manifestations as what I get off of a series, but this one works quite well. But what I found out is this device is cranking so powerfully on the spirit field that a whole bunch of things began to happen, and believe it or not, this device here knocked me out of the research arena for about a year. Now this device distinguished itself so much and it proved to be so powerful and life-altering that I had to give it a name, so I call it a lab ark, meaning a laboratory or experimental ark, referring to the Ark of the Covenant that the Israelites put together and carried around with them. But there's many ways that this is not like the Ark of the Covenant, in the fact, first of all, is that the ark actually refers to the box, and this actually represents what was actually on the lid. But the box that was below it had the 10 Commandments, it had Aaron's rod that budded, and it had a jar of manna in it. But that was in the box, and the word ark is also from the Noah's Ark, which is Noah's box. Also, the cherubim that were on the lid of the ark were shaped in such a way that their wings touched and their bases were connected via the gold of the lid. So there was actually a connection between them. And I found out with these devices, as I said, that they cannot be connected. So that's a difference. But one of the main reasons I want to use that term, the lab ark, is because if you know about the history of the Ark of the Covenant, it was dangerous and it was unpredictable. Even the priests who served in the temple and worked with the ark, they actually had bells around the bottoms of their robes that they wore, so that the people outside the area could hear that they were still alive, and they would tie a rope to their legs, to their ankle, so that if the bells stopped jangling, they knew that the priest had been killed, and they would pull on the rope and drag his body out of the area where the ark was, because no one dared to enter it. Also in scriptures it talks about times where enemy troops had captured the ark, and plagues and stuff broke out and killed so many people, and fire broke out from the ark. It was a very dangerous and unpredictable device. And I want that to carry here, because I found that this thing is also dangerous and unpredictable. And because this device is unpredictable, you don't want to leave it running until you figure out what it is or is not going to do. So a person can actually cover the ends of the crystals. You can put paper in between here in the plates, can take the plates down, but they're kind of fussy to deal with. But what I did and found is handy is I taped the crystals to the risers, or take the risers to this small base here and that to the larger base. And then when I want to shut this thing down, I just tip this thing over on its side. And because it's taped, that when I want to start it back up again, I just tip it back up, and because it's taped, it's still in its right position, still has a 3-inch gap in there, so I don't have to worry about this thing doing something when I'm not expecting it. The ark was also 24 karat gold. The lid and the cherubim that were on top, solid 24 karat gold. The box itself was acacia wood coated inside and out with 24 karat gold, and it was set inside of a temple or tabernacle that pretty much everything in there was coated with 24 karat gold. And the fascinating thing is that the spirit field races and accelerates and flies over the surface of 24 karat gold. So if you look at the tabernacle of Moses or the temple of David, everywhere you see a 24 karat gold, that spirit field would just be shooting over the top of that. Another reason I like the title of a laboratory ark is the simple imagery of the spirit field manifesting between two 24 karat gold cherubim. Now, their cherubim in the original one were connected via the base. These are not. But still what we have is where in the original God would manifest between the two cherubim. And here what we're doing is we're firing spirit energy between the two cherubim, coming from that direction and that direction. So that energy is manifesting between two 24 karat gold cherubim. If we want to call them, let's just call them flying cherubim. And the other thing that's fascinating about this is when you think about the Dawkins effect, the Dawkins effect squeezes things down. This thing, the spirit field fires here, and it gets between the 24 karat gold plates, and they just fling it. It causes it to fly in all directions here. And what that does is it creates an opening. So as this Dawkins effect would squeeze things down, this device creates an opening. And it's so fascinating because right in here, right where the marker field is absorbed, right into this point, interesting things that I've noticed right in here. To be sure, there is a whole nother world right in here. And if you could say a portal to a different dimension right in there.